Learn HTML, CSS, and JavaScript fast by creating this custom online quiz. All of the source code will be available through the GitHub link in the description. First, we want to go ahead and open Visual Studio Code. If you guys need help installing this and getting it set up, I'll leave a link up top and down below where I show you guys just how to do that. Once I get it open, I'm going to close out of all of this information. And from here, what I want to do is make sure that my File Explorer on the left side is open. And here I can go ahead and click Open Folder and open the folder where I want to create this quiz. Once I have this open, I can go ahead and close out of this welcome page, get rid of all these errors down in the bottom right corner, right click in my File Explorer, click New File, and create my index.html. Once I create this, I can go ahead and type in an exclamation mark and go ahead and hit enter, and that will generate our boilerplate for today. And for our title, which is going to be located in your web browser tab, we're going to go ahead and call this online quiz. And then from here, what we need to do is go ahead and go back to our File Explorer, create a new folder, call this styles. Inside of this styles folder, create a new file, and we'll call this styles.css. And then back in our index.html page, we need to link to this style page using a link element. And you guys are going to notice that Visual Studio Code generates our rel equal to style sheet and our href, where we can go ahead and link to our styles.css file, and you guys will see it uses this pathway here to go into a new folder and select this file. Next, since we're going to be using JavaScript today, I'm going to create a new folder. Go ahead and call this scripts, and inside of this folder, I'm going to create a scripts.js file, and back in the index.html, what I want to do is create a script element and go ahead and link using src to our new JavaScript file that we just created. So we'll do the same thing like we just did for our CSS file. Navigate to our scripts folder and to our scripts.js file. And to make sure that this works, we also need to include the defer attribute here. Now that I have the file structure set up for this online quiz, what I need to do is open my live server by clicking Go Live down here in the bottom right corner. If you guys need help getting this set up, I'll leave a link up top and down below where I show you guys how to do it. But now you guys are going to see that it opens up the live server here, and all you can see right now is the title of online quiz, because we haven't actually created any HTML content yet. So what I'm going to do is move this over to the right side of the page and open my Visual Studio Code editor on the left side of the page. Now that I have this set up, I can go within my body element and create a div element, add a class of quiz-container, and inside of this div, I'll create an h1, which is going to be a heading 1 element, and I'm going to add the text movie trivia. And what you guys are going to see happen is you're going to see the text movie trivia go ahead and display on our website page, because now we have actually created some HTML content. So before we move on, I want to show you beginners just a little trick. So if we go over here to our live server, right click and go down to where it says inspect, this is going to open our developer tools inside of our browser. So from here, it'll let us view all of our HTML elements that we're using, and we can even manipulate them from right in here. So let's say I want to go ahead and change some content here. I can double click and go ahead and delete movie. Go ahead and enter that, and now you guys will see that it's just showing a trivia. And the great thing about this is this will not edit anything in your code editor. As you guys can see over here, movie is still displaying, and inside of this you can also view your styling, which we haven't created any yet, but you guys can see over here where it says styles, it will display once we start learning and using CSS today. Now underneath our h1 element, we're going to create another div and create a class called instructions. Now underneath our h1 element, I'm going to go ahead and create a div element, and now I'm going to add what's called an ID. So I'll go ahead and put a hashtag symbol and say instructions, go ahead and hit enter, and now you guys can see the ID display. This is going to be useful for when we start styling it with CSS and when we start using JavaScript to actually make this quiz dynamic. Inside of our instructions div, I'm going to create an h2, which is another type of heading, and I'm simply going to include the text instructions here. Underneath the h2 element, I'll create an h4 where I'm actually going to paste some instructions that I already typed up for this project. Underneath our instructions div, we want to go ahead and create one more div element with an ID of quiz. Inside of this, we'll create another div element. Now we'll create an h3 element that actually asks the question. So we'll say, what is 1 plus 1 right here, and you guys can see it appearing over here. Underneath our h3 heading, we'll create a div with a class of questions here, create a div with a class of question, and inside of this is where we actually want to create the answer choices that you can dynamically select as the user here. So what we need to do is create what's called an input element, and instead of it just being the default of text like it is now, what we need to do is change this to what's called a radio button, and this will actually be a selector here. And then we need to add a name attribute equal to question, add an ID equal to question 1, because this is going to be the first option here. And underneath that, we can create our label element, which actually displays the text associated with this radio selector here. So we need to make the for equal to question 1, which you guys are going to notice matches up with the ID here of our input element. So what we're doing is tying these two together. And then I need to add a class to this and make this equal to option. And then here is where we're going to put the option that you can select. So now you guys can see that if we select this, we are selecting 1 for our answer. And this is going to be a multiple choice quiz, and there's going to be 4 answer options for each question. So what I'll do is copy this question div right here, go ahead and paste it 3 more times like so. And then what I need to do is make sure I change out the ID for the input to question 2 and the for attribute for the label also to question 2, and then change the for attribute for the label also to question 2, and then change our option to 2, and then do the same for 3 and 4. And now you guys can see we have 4 options here, 1, 2, 3, and 4. For the question, what is 1 plus 1? And if I select 1 here and try and select 2, it will not let me select both here. And that's because we have the name question associated to each one of our input elements here, which is going to tie these all together and make it multiple choice, meaning it'll only let you select 1 answer option. And now underneath our quiz div here, we need to create another div with a class equal to navigation. Inside of that div, we'll create a button with an ID of start, include the text start quiz. So when we start using JavaScript to make this dynamic, when we click start quiz, it will actually start our quiz and show each question 1 at a time. And from here, I'll copy this button and paste it 3 more times down below. And for each one of these, I want to add a class equal to hide. So again, I'll copy and paste this only for these bottom 3 buttons, and then change our IDs out for each one. So now you guys can see we have 4 buttons, 1 to start the quiz, 1 to check your current answer, a button to go on to the next question, and a submit button to actually submit the quiz. And right now we have all these displaying because we haven't actually started using JavaScript and CSS to manipulate these yet. Create one more button, and this is going to be the restart button. So eventually, when we get to the end of the quiz, we can retake it again if we want. And that is going to do it for all of our HTML structure. Again, the source code will be down below, but now we need to move on to styling this page so it actually looks nice. So we'll navigate to the styles.css file. And to begin, we'll use the asterisk as our global selector here in CSS, create a font family to change our font. And I'm simply going to use Arial, and then these next two are going to be backups in case Arial doesn't work. Next, I want to target the body element in our HTML structure, and this is going to be an element selector, meaning I'm using CSS to directly select the body element here in our HTML to add styling to it. But once we move on to using classes, I will be referring to these, which are classes and our IDs, like this one down below. And first, I want to change the margin of this to 0, the padding of this also to 0. Now to change the background color, I'll use the background color styling, and I just want this to be black, so I'll use the hex code for black here. Now you guys are going to see that all of our text disappears because it's black just like the background. So to change our text color, we can simply use color and then add our hex color for white here. And for the body element, I want to add a default font size of 1 rem for all of our elements. Next, I need to start using my class selectors. So what I want to do is target the quiz container. And if you guys don't know what this is, you can go back over here to the index.html and see that I'm directly targeting this div element right here based on its class. And now I need to change the display of this equal to flex, which is going to make everything display in a row-like fashion here. And if you guys want to learn more about flex, I have a video going more in depth into it. I'll leave a link up top and down below. And next, we're going to change the flex direction to column, which is going to make this all look normal again. Justify all of our content to the center and align the items to the center. And from here, you guys will actually see a difference now. And then we want this quiz to take up 100% of our viewport height. So to do that, we can use height and use 100 VH, which is going to mean 100% of our viewport height. Now I want to target the H1 element here, change the margin property to 0, target the instructions ID, change the width to 50%, target our quiz ID, change the width also to 50%, target the H3 element and align our text to the center using text align center. And next, I need to target the questions class, which is going to target all of our answer choices here. I need to change the display equal to grid. Again, if you guys want to learn more about grid, I have a video. I'll leave a link up top and down below. Next, we'll create how many grid columns we want to have. And for now, we just want to have one at a width of 1 FR. Next, I want to target our label elements. So I'll say div followed by label. And what this means is that any label within a div will be targeted. And again, we're going to change our display equal to flex, align our items to the center, justify the content to the left, change our cursor to a pointer when we hover on it, add a transition of 0.3 seconds for when we do hover on it, change our font size to 1 rem, change our font weight to 600 to make it just a little bit bolder and easier to read, add a border property, and first we're going to make this border 2 pixels. We want it to be solid and we want it to show up as white. We'll use border radius and make this equal to 0.5 rem. And next we'll change our margin to 1 rem rem by 4 rem, and keep in mind this is the shorthand property. And then we also want to change our padding equal to 1 rem. And then we want to select our label elements again, so we'll use div followed by label, but this time we're going to use :hover, and this means these styles will only take effect when you hover over the element. And when we hover on it, we want to change our border color to this light blue color like so. So now if I hover over one of these elements, the border color will change. Select our inputs, but we only want to select our inputs where the type is equal to radio. So we'll make type equal to radio here. We'll change our position to relative, and then we want to change our display to none to successfully stop showing those inputs. And now if we just select our option here, it is still successfully selecting that input. It's just not displaying on our HTML page. Copy this selector where we're getting our radio elements, go ahead and paste it down below. But now we want this style to only happen when one of our radio buttons is checked, and then obviously our radio input elements are not showing anymore, so this needs to change our label element. So what we'll do is use this little squiggly line, which is also called the sibling selector. Use our option class here. And what this is doing here is if we select a option over here, this class is going to affect that specific label. So when that happens, we want to change our background color to our blue color. And you guys can see, since I have this one selected, it automatically changes the color. And then we want to change our text color to black, change our border, and lastly, we want to change our border color to black here. So now if I go over here, I can actually click on these and it will show that I selected it, and I can change my answer choice to whatever I want here. But once I select an answer choice, I can't unselect one. So now at this point, I have to select an answer choice. Next, we need to go ahead and style our navigation button. So what I need to do is target the navigation class and change our position to absolute, so we can place this in a specific spot on our page at all times. And we also want to change our display to flex. And from here, we want to add a margin of 4 rem. And to move this to the bottom of the screen, we'll use bottom followed by 0. And now you guys can see that moves it all the way to the bottom of our page. And we also want to add a gap of 1 rem, so we have a little bit of spacing between each one of our elements. Next, we need to target our button elements, change our font size to 1.5 rem. And don't worry, this is going to kind of overlap some of our content right now. Change our background color to black, change our text color to white, and we also want to include a border property again that's 2 pixels solid followed by white here. Change our border radius property again to 0.5 rem and add a padding of 1 rem here. Next, we need to target our button again, but on hover this time. Change our cursor to a pointer and our border color to our light blue color. Next, we'll create a media query using an @ sign followed by media. And what we're going to do with this is we're going to manipulate the size of our text and elements based on our device view width. And inside of our parentheses, we'll say max width, and we'll say 767 pixels, which is pretty normal for a mobile device. So what this is going to do is it's only going to use this styling inside of this media query if our viewport width is less than 767 pixels, meaning you're using a mobile device. And here we just need to target our HTML element and use our font size selector. And since we're using rems, which are a relative unit in CSS, we can simply say 75% here. And then if we shrink this down to a mobile viewport, you guys will see that the size of all of our elements and text go ahead and shrink down respectively based on our HTML selector here. And if you guys make this a full screen width like so, you guys will see that these buttons still overlap our answer choices, and that is simply because we're using absolute positioning, and then we're making our quiz up top here 100% of our view height. But once we start using JavaScript to make this dynamic, that problem will go away. Now you guys can see we have a fully functioning one question quiz using just plain HTML and CSS, where we can actually select an answer choice here based on our question. But the next thing we need to do is use JavaScript to make this dynamic, where we can actually ask multiple questions, make these buttons actually function, and then grade and display your result once you click the submit button. To do that, we need to navigate to our scripts file here, start off by creating a constant variable called quiz questions, and here we're going to make this equal to an array where for each question we're going to store all of the information within an object. So for this first key here in this object, we need to determine what our question is going to be. And for this one, we're going to ask in the matrix, what color pill does Neo take? And at the end of this, we also need a comma. And we'll create another key that's going to be the question number. And this one is going to be the first one. So we'll say 1. And then we need to create an answers key. And inside of this answers key, we want to make the value equal to an object, and go ahead and include each one of our multiple choice answers. So we'll start off with A, and this is going to be equal to the string red, followed by B, which is going to be blue, followed by C, which will be green, and lastly, D is going to be equal to yellow. And now we just need to create one more key, and this is going to be the correct answer. If you guys have seen the matrix, which I'm sure most of you have already, the correct answer is going to be A. And then for this quiz, we're only going to have 3 questions just to keep it simple for now. And to do this, all we need to do is copy this object and paste it down below 2 more times, and make sure you include the appropriate commas. And then I'm going to go ahead and change out all of this information for questions 2 and 3. Now I have all of the questions and the following information for each question stored within an array in a specific object for each one that I can access later to display information on my page. The next step is to use JavaScript to select all of the DOM elements, such as our buttons and our answer choices here. So what we want to start with is create a constant variable called start, and to get our start button right here, what we need to do is use document.getElementById and simply select the ID of start, which is attached right here to our start button. And if you guys don't know where to find these IDs, it's really simple. Just go back to your HTML page, and it's what we created earlier. So if we scroll down to this start button here, you're going to notice that it has an ID equal to start. And now we're going to just simply copy and paste this 5 more times. And what we need to do is change each one of these out. So this is going to select our instructions ID, our quiz ID, our next button ID, and here we're actually going to make this variable called next btn, but our ID is actually just next. Same thing here for our submit button, and this variable we'll go ahead and call submit button while we just select the submit ID. And again for our check answer button, so we'll make this equal to check, and then our variable is going to be check question answer. And then we need to create one more, and this is going to be our navigation variable, but we're going to do something a little bit different here. Since we didn't use an ID for our navigation, we'll use document.query selector, and then we need to select our navigation class. So we'll tell it to look for a class with a period here, simply followed by navigation. Next, we need to create our state variables, which are actually going to need to change. So for this, we're going to create these variables using the let keyword instead of the const keyword. And our first one is going to be the question index value that we're going to be using, and it's going to start off at a default of 0. And we need somewhere to store the user selected answers, so we'll create another variable called selected answers and make this equal to an empty array. And we also need to get the correct answers so we can actually successfully grade this quiz. So we'll create a correct answers variable. And what we need to do here is get our quiz questions array, use our map method, which is going to go through this entire array and return us a new array based on what we're looking for. So we'll put in Q, which is simply going to be a parameter in the callback function here. And then all we want to do here is use Q dot correct answer. And what this is going to do is it's going to return a new array based on only the correct answers up here in our quiz questions. And before we move on, what I want to go ahead and do is navigate back to my index.html page. And everything within our quiz div element here, we're going to go ahead and comment out for now, because later on we're going to dynamically render all of the information for each question using JavaScript instead of hard coding it into our HTML. Next, we need to create a function called show questions so we can actually start up our quiz when we click the start quiz button. And here we need to create a constant called single question because we want each one of our questions to display one at a time, and make this equal to our quiz questions. And to get a specific question, what we're going to do is use our question index value right here. So right now, since this defaults to 0, what this is going to do is it's going to select the first element in our array, which is going to contain all of the information for our first question, since arrays start from 0 and count upward. And now we can use our quiz variable here to actually display the first question. So we'll say .inner HTML, and what we're going to do is make this equal to backticks. These are not quotation marks. These are normally located at the top left of your computer. And inside of these backticks, what we need to do is start off by creating a div element, and we're going to add a custom attribute of data-id- question number for our question number, and we need to make this equal to our current question number. So to do that, what we need to do is use our $ and our curly braces to use JavaScript here. And inside of this, we need to use our single question variable, and we need to get our question index value here. So what this is going to do is it's going to generate a unique attribute for each one of our questions that we display. And make sure you include your closing div tag. Next, we're going to create an h3 element, and all we need to do here is display the question itself. So we'll again use our $ and curly braces, use our single question, and this time all we need is the question itself, which is going to grab this right here. Next, we'll create another div, and this one's going to include a class of questions. And inside of this questions div, we need to use JavaScript to display each one of our answer choices. So what we're going to do is use object get the entries, and for our entries we're going to use our single question and get our answers. And we need to map through this information, and in our callback what we need to do is also use our key, our value, and have a value that we can index as we go through this. Use our backticks one more time. Create another div with a class equal to question. And here is where we're actually going to create our input. And this again is going to be type equal to radio, just like how we created it using standard HTML. Our name is going to be equal to question. And now we need to make each one of our IDs unique. So to do this, we'll start off with simply question, and then we need to dynamically change our value at the end here. So we'll use our single question dot question number here, and then we also want to include a dash followed by our index value. So for this we'll say idx plus 1. So what this is going to do is it's going to generate a unique ID for every single answer choice in our quiz, and this will prevent any JavaScript errors from occurring. Create our label, and our for is going to be equal to what we just included for our ID, for our input field here. So we can just go up here and simply copy this information and paste it within our label to make sure that these are successfully tied together. And this also needs to have a class equal to option. And we need to include our closing label tag here. And for our label, we're going to use JavaScript again to dynamically render this. And we simply need to display the value here. And then on the input element, I also need to include a value equal to our key here. So what I'll do is go ahead and dynamically render this using JavaScript and simply say key right here. So the reason we're doing this is so we can render out every one of our question answers, and each one will have a unique ID and for attribute here, which will prevent any errors from occurring when JavaScript is rendering each one of these questions. And lastly, we need to go right here and use our join method here on this new array and simply join it using quotation marks. Increment our question index value. So we'll just use plus plus to add 1. And now we created this function, but if we click on this button, it doesn't actually start our quiz yet. So to get this to actually work, what we need to do is create another function called start quiz. And inside of this function is where we'll go ahead and call our show questions function to actually display our quiz. And then once we start our quiz, we want to get rid of our instructions. So we'll say instructions.classList add the class hide, which is just going to change our display to none, removing these instructions. And we're going to copy this and paste it down below because we also need to do the same thing to our start button. We want to hide that once we start the quiz. And now we need to attach an event listener to our start variable here. So what we want to do is say .event listener. We want this to be a click event, and then we simply want to call our start quiz function. And now if I go ahead and refresh this and click start quiz, you guys are going to notice that it successfully displays our first quiz question. But the problem we're having is that the instructions and the start button are still displaying. So what we need to do is go back to our styles.css and we need to actually add these classes. So we're going to have one class for show, which is going to change our display to block, displaying it on the page. And then we need to have another class called hide, which is going to change our display to none, removing our element from the page. And once I add these two classes, you're going to notice that the rest of the buttons disappear because they all already have the hide class, changing their display to none here. But if we click start quiz, you're going to see the start button disappear and our quiz question display along with our movie trivia title. But once we answer this, there's no button to move on. So what we need to do is create another function down below to show and hide our buttons. So we'll simply call this show hide buttons. And for this, we need to display our next button. So we'll say next button.classList. And we want to toggle our show class to display this on our screen, but we only want this to happen at certain points. So what you can do here within toggle is actually create a condition. And this condition is going to be if our question index val is less than our quiz questions dot length. And we're also going to do this same thing, but now for our submit button. But for the submit button, we only want this to display on the absolute last question. So what we'll do is change this less than sign to an equal sign. So when our question index val is equal to our quiz questions dot length, meaning it's on the absolute final question, it'll show the submit button. And next, we also need to display our check question answer button. So we'll simply go ahead and add our class list using ClassList.add, and we simply want to add the show class. Now if I go over here and click Start Quiz, you guys are going to see that none of these buttons display yet, and that's because of the way we have our show and hide classes ordered here. So what we need to do is make sure our hide class comes before our show class, because remember, CSS reads top to bottom. So what you guys are going to notice now is if we click Start Quiz, our check answer button and our next button will successfully appear. So make sure you watch out for how you order your CSS when toggling and using classes with JavaScript. And now we need to set up the functionality for our next button. So what we'll do is create a new function called next question here. And what we'll do is create a constant variable called selected answer and make this equal to document.query selector. And what we're doing is looking for an input here with a name equal to question and looking to see if it is checked or not. So we'll include colon followed by checked. Now we need to use an if statement to see if something actually has been selected. So we'll say exclamation mark selected answer, and what this is doing is it's seeing if a value is checked. And if nothing is checked, what we want to do is alert our user to select an answer choice. So we'll simply say select answer choice. And then if they haven't selected anything, we want to kill the rest of our function using return. And if something is selected, it will skip this code. And what we need to do is use our selected answers array. And this is the array that we created up top right here, and push the value. So what we'll do is use the array method of push and get our selected answer, and what we want is the value here. And then we want to again call our show questions function to display the next question. And to make this work, we need to use our next button variable, and we want to add an event listener, and this is again going to be a click event, and we want to call our next question function. So now if I go ahead and click Start Quiz and select Next, you're going to see that it tells me to select an answer choice. But if I go ahead and select an answer choice here, such as blue, and click Next, it will successfully take me to the next question, and it will include my selected answer in our array. And now we want to actually be able to check each one of our answers as we go through this quiz. So what we need to do is create another function called check answer, and inside of this function we can simply copy this selected answer variable and just paste it down here. And keep in mind, these are not going to interfere with each other because they are inside of a function, meaning that they're only accessible in the function scope. What we want to do is use our if statement again, so we'll copy this, go down below, and simply paste it here. But for this one, we don't need to have a return statement at this point, so we'll go ahead and delete that. So if we don't have something selected, it will alert us. But next, we need to check for another condition. So what we want to do is use our selected answer dot value and see if this is equal to the correct answer. So to do that, we need to use our correct answers, use our question index value, and now you might think we can stop here, but we need to include -1 because remember, we already incremented our question index value here, so it has moved on to the next question. So to successfully check for the right question here, you want to subtract 1 to make sure we're looking for the current question. And if our selected answer is equal to the correct answer, we want to go ahead and alert our user that this is the correct answer. And lastly, we need to have an else statement and alert our user that this is the incorrect answer. So I'll simply say incorrect answer here. Now we need to tie all of this together by using our check button and adding an event listener. And this is again going to be on click. And we want to call our check answer function right here. Now, if I go ahead and start this quiz, and let's say I select blue, which is obviously wrong, and click check answer, it's going to say incorrect answer. But if I select the correct one and want to check it, it will say that I selected the correct answer. Next, I want to create a function where we can actually submit our quiz. So I'll simply call this function submit quiz. And what we want to do is use this code from our next question button, simply paste it here because we again want to make sure something is selected before somebody submits the quiz. And again, we want to add our last answer choice to our selected answers array. So we'll simply use this same line code again. And keep in mind, you can store this all within a separate function, but I'm doing it like this here today so you guys can see how you can reuse code and how sometimes you might even repeat yourself. And now we need to tie this to our submit button. So we'll use submit button.add event listener. And this is going to again happen on click. And we simply need to call our submit quiz function. And so now if I start this quiz and I answer it all the way through, once I get to the end, it will give me the option to submit the quiz, except for the fact this doesn't actually do anything yet. So what we need to do is actually calculate the final score. So we'll create a function called calculate score, create a variable using let, call this current count, and what we want to do is start this off at 0. And what we need to do is create a for loop. So what we want to do here is initialize I equal to 0, and we want to run this while I is less than correct answers dot length. And we want to increment this loop every single time. And inside of this loop, we want to test if our selected answers, meaning the ones that we chose while we took the quiz, are equal to the correct answers for each one. And if this is true, what we want to do is go ahead and increment the current count by 1. So we'll just use ++ here. And now we need to set up a basic equation, and what this is going to be called is percent per question. And what we're doing is seeing how much each question should be worth. So to do this, we simply want to take 100 and divide it by the correct answers dot length. And finally, we need to calculate the final score. So to do this, we're going to use percent per question times the current count. Now we need to actually get our final score. So to do this, we'll create a score variable. And what we want to do is use our percent per question and multiply this times our current count variable. And the last thing we want to do is call our final alert function and pass in our score. Then to make this actually work, we need to create our final alert function down below. So we'll do this, pass in a parameter for this function. And inside of this function, we're just going to create a big if statement. So it's going to alert the user with something different based on what they score, and also display them dynamically with what their score was here. We need to go back to our submit quiz function and actually call our calculate score function here. And then if we refresh this and take this quiz, and let's say we score a 100 by entering all of these correctly, and click submit quiz. And now you guys are going to see that I'm not getting the correct message, and that's because for correct answers, I accidentally typed in 1 instead of I. So what we'll do is go ahead and retake this quiz and ace it one more time, and then go ahead and click submit quiz. And now, based on whatever you score, it will display that score dynamically to you when you click submit, and it will display you with a custom message like so. And since we only have 3 questions here, if let's say I only get 2 correct, it's going to display a whole bunch of decimal places like this. So to fix that problem, we simply need to pass our score dot to fixed, and we only want 2 decimal places here. So if I retake this again and only score 1 correct, let's say, it will only give us 2 decimal places now. And when we get to the end of this quiz, we want to display the restart button once we click submit. Create another function called show restart button here, and we don't need to pass any parameters. And here I'm going to show you guys how to create elements dynamically with JavaScript. So what I want to do is create a restart variable, make this equal to document.createElement, and here I want to create a button, and to add text to this I'll say restart.innerText and make this equal to restart. And I also want to include an ID, so I'll say restart.id equals restart. And then I want to add this to my navigation, so I'll use navigation.append, and I want to append the restart button to the navigation, which will add it to the end. Next, we need to use our restart variable, add an event, a listener. This event is going to be click, and then we need to call our reset quiz function. So now we need to go ahead and actually create the reset quiz function. So we'll create it down below here. And to reset this quiz, we need to change our question index value to a 0, empty out our selected answer array. So we'll just change this to an empty array. And then we need to remove our restart. So we'll say document.getElementById, and we want to select our restart button and say .remove. And from here, all we need to do is get this function here and call it within our submit quiz function. And you guys are going to see I'm running into an error here, and that's because I didn't call the show questions function down here in the reset quiz function. So now if I take this quiz again all the way through and submit it and click restart, you guys are going to see that it restarts the quiz from scratch. But we don't want this restart button to display here. So to fix that, we need to go to our index.html and remove our restart button right here. So if we do that and take this quiz just one more time, you guys are going to notice that once we click submit and restart this, it only shows our check answer and next button now, and we can retake this quiz as many times as we want. Congratulations! You just learned how to create a fully functioning online quiz using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. You can do this to quiz people on whatever you like on your website, or if you just want to have fun with friends online. If you guys have any questions, please reach out to me down below in the comments. I'll be happy to help you out. Thanks so much for watching.